Welcome to Integrated Performance Podcast. This is episode 7, and I'm going to have a very close friend of mine, colleague, I'm going to say mentor. She'll probably argue that, but at one point, she was somebody who brought me in to her community and brought me forward in life. Barb Oviatt is an incredible yogi. Now, I've been around a lot of yogis in my life, and I've been trained by some incredible yogis, but she is as well-rounded and as balanced and as service-oriented yogi that I have ever seen. And she's somebody here in town in Liberty Lake, Spokane area that serves the community with her yoga mat called The Mat that she's been operating since about 2010. Her yoga path has been a little over a 20-year journey. But before that, she was on the journey of Taekwondo. So she's a black belt in Taekwondo, competing at a very high level, instructing at a high level. And so that journey started way back over 30 years ago in the Taekwondo world, and turned from Taekwondo to yogi into nutritional coach. And obviously on top of all this is also a mother of 3 amazing children and a wife, and just devoted in her community. So I'm so excited to have you here. We're going to let you introduce yourself a little bit of kind of what got you to this place, and then kind of maybe fill in our conversation of what brought us together and working together, and then have a conversation about balance, right? And so what does that look like? How do we find it? How do we navigate it? How do we maintain it if it's even possible? So Barb, thank you for being here. So excited to have you on, and just looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Ryan. I really looked forward to this opportunity for you to get started on this podcast. First of all, I was thrilled to hear you were doing it, and then to be asked to be on here with you. I'm honored to do that. So I respect your path and where you're going, which is why I reached out to you originally, just to put that in there. Was I was doing my due diligence on social media, which I try to stay a little bit away, but I was going through and just doing the business, and came across a post that you had posted that you had just finished this Kokoro yoga certification. And it intrigued me because it brought both my martial arts and my yoga together. So I am, like you said, a martial artist turned yogi, but they are so integrated. They so work together. And that's what kind of steered me into yoga, was the interest. I wish I had my yoga practice where it is now when I was competing in Taekwondo. That would have changed the game for me, but I didn't have the mindset part of that, of physical activity and competition way back in my 20s. So it would have been interesting to incorporate those two together. But then when you brought Kokoro yoga to the mat and shared that with our community, it really intrigued me, putting the two together, because they are very integrated martial arts, and yoga is a martial art, right?
Yeah. So I would love to hear just a little bit more, Barbara, kind of what led you to take on Taekwondo in the very beginning, and then what led you from Taekwondo to yoga? Just give us a little bit of context into what has got you to where you are right now today, as somebody who I look up to, collaborate with, and excited just to work with in our coaching method. So.
Yeah. So we go way back to when I just had graduated from high school, and I didn't really have much of a path. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know, didn't have a path. And I came across this martial arts school that was just down the street from where I was working in a pharmacy. And I just was intrigued I really wanted to learn self-defense. And that's really what got me there. I was like, I would really like to learn some self-defense. So as an adult, like a young adult, fresh out of high school adult. And I just walked into this studio and just watched. And then I was like, yeah, I kind of want to do this. I was fairly physically active. I, could do most sports averagely. And getting out of high school there, I wasn't doing anything like that. So I was like, yeah, this looks like it could keep me in shape, and it looks kind of interesting. Well, I just became part of this family in this martial arts school, and it just was what I needed. It filled a need for me at that time in my life where I was a little bit lost. It gave me purpose. It gave me a family, that I went every day and trained, and I got good at it to the point where I was competing on, this was Canada, so this is a provincial level, and at the pinnacle of that, won the Canadian Women's Championship. So it
Wow. Did
was
not
like,
know
it was like
that.
a big deal in my life. Yeah, it was, I don't
Wow.
for the, it was a
What,
big
so what
deal.
year was that? What year did you win that?
That was 1986.
1986
Were
Canadian
you alive?
champion.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that was a long time ago, and there wasn't a lot of women. So we trained with men mostly. And so when we got to that level where we were competing with women, then it was, we were ready, and it
Yeah.
was fun. We went as a team out there to Toronto, and then I got married and moved to the United States, and it was a little different. It was martial arts studios are like yoga studios. You kind of find your family, and then it's like leaving your family. So I had come down, and my life just changed. I went in a different direction. I was still teaching or training. I trained at the University of Montana because my husband was going to school there. So I trained with their team, and they're a very strong team there. So that was a good experience for me. But my competition kind of slid. I just lost the groove of that and competed a little bit down here in the United States. But then, things changed. We moved again, and I was working, my husband was working, and it just became secondary. But once we adopted 3 children, and when I adopted our first child, and he got to about 5, I was like, I'd really like him to get into martial arts. It's such a great tool. I wish I'd had it as a kid. And there just wasn't any. We were living here at the time in Liberty Lake, and I was really looking for a good solid school like I had and didn't find it. So I thought, I could just start teaching. So I started teaching this little tiny group of his friends at the Liberty Lake Athletic Club here, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew, and it became this huge monster of a school. And it was so fun. And my boys both went through the whole program, got their black belts, and became instructors as well. And we created this Liberty Lake Taekwondo school, and it was awesome. And it still is going today. Of course, there's other coaches that are running it, but it's been just a great thing in the community to help primarily kids, right? Like this is sort of kids get into. I got into it as an adult, and which some adults do, but it really helps kids build character, self-discipline, all of those things that we're teaching in this program as well. They learn that through martial arts. And so this program that we're talking about is so connected with what we teach in martial arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And the integrated approach is beautiful when you start to bring things in, where it's like you're able to connect these dots, like, it's martial arts is a lot like in yoga, it's just like this, and and you create this way of just being in the world, right? And I love the fact too that you just happened to mention, because this is a big part of what we talk about is, social emotional well-being through understanding and being able to meet our own basic human needs of, I heard you say family. So there's a level of connection there. I heard you say purpose. So the idea of they're finding meaning and being able to contribute and to grow and these different pieces. So all of those checked your boxes. And for you to be aware, like, this is important. We have to understand, like, this is, if there's a hole in our life to a certain degree, like that's some sort of a basic human need that's not being met, right? That we need to then learn how to source ourselves from a place where we feel good enough, we feel connected, we know who we are from the inside out, and we have a sense of meaning, but then go out and actually act in a way where we're fulfilling those needs. The human side of us is going out and we're finding connection and reaffirming who we are and how we present ourselves to the world and our sense of meaning. And so that leads into today's conversation of, like, that's a really vast conversation of balance, right? Of balance. So coming from a champion Taekwondo, professional yogi, incredible mother, servant leader, like, what you hear the word balance, like, what's the first thing that you think about when you hear the word balance?
When you first said, how about talking about balance, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh yes, this is great. It's like you said, it's very vast, but in yoga, there has to be like a physical balance. And I talk about it a lot, like from your foundation, meaning your feet, like you get your feet on the mat, and you have to be able to find balance. And so many people struggle with that, like just actually lifting one foot up off of their mat and finding balance on one foot. So we can talk about it like that, like physically finding balance, but it's so much more, right? Like if we can't find that, it's more than just you're struggling with your core strength or whatever it is, like your mind's probably all over the place.
Mm.
And in order to really find balance, we have to have opposition, right? So I can't just look at my feet and hope that I can find balance from there. I have to have like a lift from my sternum, and I have to have this core engaged, and there has to be opposite muscle movement in order to find the balance. And that's what we are talking about in the integrated performance tools that you've given us. Is there has to be opposition, right? In everything. There's opposition in everything we do through life, the pleasure and pain and suffering, and there has to be opposition in all of those things in order for us to really truly find balance. So
Mm.
for me, as practicing yoga or coaching yoga or being a mother or being a wife or whatever it is, I have to find balance in all of that. It can't be, and there's been, and I'm not saying that I'm like the master of that. I think we all have to work at that, like on a daily basis. I have to work on the balance of taking care of myself as well as taking care of my family, or and all of that, which are the tools that
Yep.
we learn so much from this integrated performance.
Well, I want to go back just a little bit, because I wrote down one of the very similar notes of like, okay, well, if I think about it in terms of the physical form of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
right, and the actual
Right.
like asana practice of
Mm-hmm.
movement and breath, where most people think of yoga, that's what they think about, right? They think about stretchy bendy. They think about,
Mm-hmm.
a yoga class and an instructor in the front and upward dog and downward dog. And, and so I was like, okay, well, one of the poses that's, kind of based in balance at a foundational levels is a mountain pose, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
mountain poses, obviously we have both feet on the ground. So like how much balance is actually achieved by just standing there? Well, there's some, but it's not going to be, most of us should be able to feel fairly balanced by just standing with both of our feet on the ground, right? So we have to push ourselves a little bit physically to find physical balance, meaning that maybe I have to go into tree pose where I'm taking one foot up off the ground, and whether I place that foot on my calf or on the inside of my thigh or wherever I'm placing that foot. And okay, then there's another level of balance that has to be created. And I can make that harder by even, okay, now try closing your eyes and watch what your mind does and how you lose
Mm-hmm.
focus. And you begin to like have a extra level of chatter. Like, well, I can't keep balance with my eyes closed. Right. I mean, that's what happens to me anyway. And then you can go into say, okay, once you find balance in the tree pose, then it's okay, work forward into warrior 3, where now, my body is, my one foot is still on the ground, but my body is horizontal. And I'm working to stretch my arms up over my head or whatever that may look like, whatever version of warrior 3. But this idea that if we can create stress, right, good stress, resistance, physically, then we're going to be able to bring ourselves back into a place of balance and be even more balanced in that tree pose, right? So balance is sometimes confused with comfort, and I don't believe that balance is found through comfort. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, totally. I think that I think it's human nature. We want to be comfortable. We want to, we don't necessarily want to work. Like today in class, for whatever reason, I had like 3 people in class who could hyperextend. And to me, that's a good example of, so I just broke it down. We stopped and we looked at that, and like hyperextending joints, there's no balance there. So then there's no strength because they've gone past the point of where the mobility of the joint should be. And so we have to back up and find maybe physical balance so that the muscles around that joint are going to strengthen and hold that joint where it needs to be. So like pulling, sometimes balance means pulling back, right? Or stepping back a little bit. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, even if we go into like talking about martial arts again, when I coached martial arts, the kids would, or myself even, like we would train and train and train and train and train, and we get really comfortable and we're like really good and we're ready to go. And then we get to competition and, it's scary, right? It's uncomfortable. And it's like, oh no. And the kids would then, break down in crying or whatever it was. And it's this resistance of, I don't know what's going to happen and I'm scared. And so we work on finding that balance of pushing past that uncomfortable and just moving into this space of, oh, let's see what's going to happen. Of course, we need to feel safe, right? But once we reassure the child, oh, you're going to be safe because I'm here coaching you. And if anything, it doesn't look safe, then I'm going to stop it. So you go in there and you just do what we have trained, right? What we've trained, and finding that balance with kids or with any of us. It can be applied to anything, right? Like anything in life, like something scary, like yesterday. So you're working with my daughter who's 15 and totally good with that being out there.
Yeah.
And she is learning these tools. So yesterday she wanted to buy batteries for something. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to drive up to the front of Safeway. I'm going to let you out and you go buy the batteries. And she instantly went into, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. Never mind. I don't need the batteries. No, it's okay. I don't need the batteries. And then she went into the whole, oh, my anxiety. Right. And so I pulled over, parked the car, and I said, hey, let's just break it down. Like, what are you feeling? And I went through the steps of, well, how does that make you feel? And just everything we've learned, you don't own anxiety, you're feeling a little anxious because you haven't gone into a store by yourself and bought something maybe ever. And so all by yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so that sent this bit of fear, same thing, right? Like I had to take her into this place of, oh, you've done that with me a million times, but now going out on your own, it took you into this place of, ooh, that makes me feel anxious. Like, I'm not sure how that's going to work. How's that whole transaction going to work? How's it going to work in the ring when I don't know who I'm fighting? I don't know what they're going to do. Same idea, right? So finding this balance of regulating ourselves and being able to practice that. And if we go back to the physical form of yoga, we have to practice balancing like physically in order to get good at it. She's going to have to practice finding that balance of her feelings and being able to push into the uncomfortable in order to be good at it and just be like, oh, yeah, that made me feel a little bit like this. Now, if I would have known that, if I'd have had that tool when I was competing, it would have changed the game. So for athletes, I think learning these tools and finding this balance of, I'm a little bit scared, but I'm also super anxious about seeing what's going to happen here. Am I going to win? Am I not going to win? Like we talk a lot about that, right? There's no losing in life.
Right. Yeah. And that's a topic for another podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
going down that rabbit hole. It's easy to go down all kinds of rabbit holes, but I want to unpack further because you just naturally led us into this conversation. And I love where you took that of talking about the sense of psychological safety that is going to be needed for us to maintain balance in our life, because it's a basic human need for us to feel safe. And when all of our needs are met, we do feel safe. Therefore, we feel safe to step out and push ourselves. And whether that's buying batteries at a grocery store, or whether that's competing on the Taekwondo mat, or whether that's starting a business, or, being a teenager who's an athlete in high school and competing at a high level there, or, whatever it is, this ability to self-soothe, this ability to regulate, this ability to be able to feel something, but not attached to it. And then we had this conversation, and I remember way back in my own journey of overcoming, dark, deep depression, saying this and actually labeling it, saying, oh, it's mine. It's my depression. My depression is really bad today. And like attaching to it, identifying it in such a way, like there was no separation. There wasn't me as a spirit or as a human. And then here's this experience that I'm having. And when I realized and recognized like how important this verbiage is to say, I am, and I'm not then merging that with the depression, right? Or merging that with what I'm experiencing or feeling, right? So this ability balance is going to be much easier. We're going to be able to step out and push ourselves to much greater lengths, the greater our capacity is to be able to regulate ourselves, to be able to self-soothe, to be able to feel something rise up within us, an impulse, a sensation that rises up within us that's going to happen when we're in the unknown. At any point in time, we're doing something that our brain processes it as a threat. When we don't know how something's going to turn out, it immediately is going to tell us this isn't safe. It's not safe out there. That grocery store is not safe. Right. So what do we do with that?
How our brain is built, right?
Yeah. So then now we go, oh, okay, there might be some danger there, but I know I'm safe. And what you did is such a beautiful thing as a parent to say, okay, I'm going to create this container within this car right now where you're safe. Like, you got this. We've done this. There's a level of credibility here. So you build a little bit of confidence, make them feel safe before they step out into the unknown and take on whatever task, goal, obstacle is facing them. But this ability to regulate ourselves is so incredibly important, to be able to then find more balance more often. Because here is the next piece that I have found. And as you study like happiness, like say, for example, like if you try to find happiness or be happy, like it's fleeting, incredibly fleeting. But if you do the things and you live in an integrated approach to life that are going to lead to happiness, like you'll slip into it. You'll wake up one day and be like, oh shit, I'm happy, right? Like life is good, right? And that's very true in my own life, like where, you take a very integrated approach to life, from mindset to personal discovery, to nutrition, to movement. And it's like, man, I feel really grounded right now. I feel really balanced. So you're taking this integrated approach to life where you're able to slip into the balance, because if you try to find balance, I believe it's fleeting. Like I believe it's a passing moment where you felt it and then it's gone. Because what ends up happening is, like you said earlier, as a human being, we're kind of wired to try to conserve energy. So like comfort is kind of like, ooh, that's safety. I'm good here. Everything's kind of really good in life. Don't disturb it. Keep things in this little container of happiness and of balance, because if you shake the ship a little bit, something might fall out. Whereas in all reality, we need to be able to, push ourselves outside of our comfort zone a little bit, but then be able to regulate. And then I believe, instead of, if we try to find balance, we're kind of walking a tightrope, right? I'm trying to find balance. Oh, there it is. No, it's gone. Where it is. There it is. Now it's gone. Whereas if I take an integrated approach to life, that I can have an experience where it's more like walking down a sidewalk, and my life feels balanced. Where if I don't pay attention, I might walk off the edge. But most of my life, I feel pretty grounded and balanced because I'm doing all these things on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, right? Does that make sense? So this importance to regulate is what you brought up, to feel psychologically safe, to create this environment, you as a parent, as a leader, as a coach, as a teacher, creating this environment within yourself, regulating yourself. Therefore, the person that you're impacting feels safe to set out to create more balance in their life. Yeah.
It's a continued yin and yang of hard and soft, at the center of that, finding the center of hard and soft constantly. We do that like on the mat, like in whatever pose. I could pick any pose and there would need to be some hard and some soft, right? In that pose, warrior one, there needs to be hard on one side, soft on the other side, right? In order to find the balance of that. Triangle, I could pick headstand, handstand, there has to be some hard and some soft. I have to be integrated into my foundation, right? Anchored in, but I also have to be soft in my spine in order to find balance. So a handstand is a great example of physically finding balance, because so many people struggle with it because they're all just like, it's so hard, everything's hard. And so once they find the soft in the handstand, they find balance, right?
That's interesting. Okay, so let's take this into the application of life. Like, I'm somebody who is listening to this podcast right now. I'm intrigued by this idea of taking a fully integrated approach to life, everything from movement, nutrition, mindset, personal discovery, personal philosophy, all these different pillars that we've talked about, that we'll continue to uncover and talk about. Like for you, where do you start? Where would you have somebody start to find balance in their life? Like what's like number one thing? Let's get this squared away. This is important. This is going to help you find more balance.
You mean just in, like, give me an example of what our life. I'll give you an example. So yesterday, Lizzie and I were having a conversation, and she decided to pack abs. And I said, oh, I can totally tell you and show you how to get there, like completely. And I said, a six-pack starts in the kitchen. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you have to have the nutrition piece. You're never going to get a six-pack of abs if you're not doing the nutritional piece of that. And it's very aggressive in order to find that. And you're not going to be able to sustain it for a really long period of time. You can get a six pack and you can sustain it for a while, but that's not balance. Like, God didn't make us that way with six pack abs, right? We have to have that balance. We can certainly get there, and we're going to work on it. Her and I are going to go for it for 30 days and see how well we can do. But then we have to find balance in that, right? Like your body needs carbs and it needs fats, and it, in order for your body to function the way God intended it to. If we take all the carbs out, our brain isn't going to work very well, so there has to be this balance. Your body needs all those things. And yes, we can create this and we can go off balance for a little while, but at some point we need to shift back. And there's the yin and the yang. Why do I want to achieve? Why do I want to get that six pack abs? So I look really good at the beach in the summer. Okay, let's do it. And then let's find balance. Let's come back off of that and know that we don't have to swing from extreme to extreme. So coming back to your question, if somebody comes to me and they want balance in their life, I would, narrow that down to like what, like spiritually, physically, are we talking you want to lose weight, that sort of thing. So that then, because in all of that, the whole realm, we have to find balance. Somebody's coming to me and they're like, I can't balance in handstand. I'm like, okay, let's look at it from the foundation and go up, from there. And usually the foundation is off, and that could be like, we could look at that in any direction. We could look at that spiritually. Like I had someone come in today and they said, I just want to find more spirituality through yoga. And I'm like, well, we need to start at the ground up. Like, what is your belief? What is your, you have to find that first. We could say that's your feet, or we could say, what is your belief in the purpose of
having some sort of faith. And without going down the spiritual path, like, would you say the foundation is what I'm hearing then is nutrition and is physical movement, is a wonderful place to start when it comes to building your own foundation to say, okay, from there now, other parts of life are going to be easier. Your mental, emotional balance, your spiritual balance, your relationships, work, life balance.
There's all these limbs, right? And all these tree limbs that we have to all come into the trunk of the tree, right? It all has to come back to that for balance. And then it goes off, and like you're saying, it sways. The tree sways in life. Gets a little bit off balance, and then we pull back. And it always has to come back to the foundation of purpose, right? Purpose in life.
Finding meaning, starting with the physical form, starting with nutrition, starting with some movement, starting with this idea of understanding. I believe this is the thing that is really transformative about yoga, because yoga is a very vast conversation that we will continue to unfold. But what people don't know is that the physical components of yoga, the flowing, the asana practice, is really just to prepare you to be still, to create the mental and emotional balance that's created through meditation, visualization, breath work, prayer, right? Those pieces is what creates the stillness in your mind that allows for you then to explore other possibilities, and you'll be able to like select and find how, everything is exactly how it's supposed to be. So therefore you can celebrate however things are. But we start first, before we try to sit still, we start with making sure that our nutrition is on point and that we're moving properly, right? That our body is liberated, the energy is liberated within it enough to be able to sit still long enough to actually explore yourself and to heal mentally and emotionally, and to uncover and to discover mentally and emotionally and within yoga. So that's a wonderful place to get started, is to say, okay, let's make some little micro adjustment, some little incremental shift within that realm, and create it in a way that's sustainable, right? That's the other thing I heard you say is like, whatever we're doing within an integrated approach to life, it's not some sort of a health in one whole full substitution from one day to the next. Like, it's an incremental shift to where we're leading ourselves down a path where whatever we're doing is sustainable, right? That's how we're going to find balance.
Absolutely. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to be, that's like with nutrition. You can do a diet, but are you doing something that's sustainable? You can't eat protein for the rest of your life. You have to find something that, has that sustainable balance.
I love using the word lifestyle rather than a diet too, right? Like, what kind of lifestyle shift are you going to make that's going to stick with you, right? Yeah.
It needs to be a shift. Diets, any diet can work and, to gain a goal, but then where do you go from there? Right. That's why
Yeah.
people yo-yo all the time, and they're coming, I just can't, maintain it. But yeah, it needs to be part of your lifestyle for sure. And so, yeah, if someone comes to me and they are wanting balance, if they say that, it does, it has to start. I get them on the mat, I get them moving. I said, well, let's find balance and let's, start moving. And then this all comes up and we can graduate, because your mind's not ready for that, right? Your mind's ready. They're coming into yoga studio and I just want to move and I want to, bend and stretch and do these things. And then we start to shift into, well, yeah, that's the physical part of yoga, but it's like this much. And then there's the breath work, and then there's the mindfulness, and right? The physical part's just that what people think of yoga, the bendy, stretchy people. It's such a small part of the real practice. And today we talked about that.
I think it
and
helps to
started,
create this association too in our brain where we realize, oh, this is balance and this is being out of balance and this is me pushing myself in my physical form of a certain pose. And then seeing that show up in the connection with my breath in the world as I'm navigating with a relationship or business or sport or whatever it is. And even just the practice, like we said earlier, this ability to regulate, this ability to feel something and not attach to it. Like that's yoga, right? Is to be in a pose and to recognize a thought come to the surface that this is hard and to not attach to it. Like you are this person in this mountain and here comes a cloud and here it comes and there it goes. That's the thought. And you begin to cultivate this way of being in the world that isn't over attached or identified with what you're experiencing internally. Therefore, you don't make it mean something that it doesn't need to mean. And you don't then habituate it, right? To where it's like, oh, it's mine. It's my depression. It's my anxiety. No, it's just something you're experiencing and it too shall pass.
Right.
Balance, I think, is also found knowing that things are constantly changing, right? And it's a constant moving target.
Well, it's the human experience, right? We're here to experience, the good and the bad, the sickness and the health, pleasure and pain, all of those things. We're here to experience those things. One is not without the other. And we have to experience, we were talking about that earlier, but like you have to experience one in order to recognize the other. If I'm always healthy, how would I know that? And how would I appreciate that if I've never been sick?
So balance. Okay. If I'm always in this perfect balance, how would I know if I was in balance if I've never been out of balance? Right. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how would I know what that feels like? So the contrast I'm hearing too is to find, to push yourself, to recognize, to be okay with, to celebrate everything that you are experiencing in life, because that's given you the awareness that there's a contrast between an overwhelm of despair and of taking on too much and of stress. And there's an overwhelm of complete moments of clarity and joy and peace and love, right? Where they're just like, oh, it's just flowing out of you. Like overwhelm can be on both ends of the spectrum and everywhere in between. But you are at the middle of everything, just witnessing it, saying like, I'm grounded, I'm here, I can regulate, I can soothe, I can surrender, let go, and transition to the next moment, staying as this like kind of witnessing self, saying, I'm not going to attach or identify to whatever I'm experiencing, whether it be overwhelm on the low end of the spectrum or overwhelm on the high end of the spectrum. Like this too shall pass. So here I am experiencing all there is to experience as a human.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah. And I think that it comes to the awareness, right? That's the first thing we need, right? Is we just need to be aware that that's going on and that that's normal. And that's the human experience. It doesn't make you sick if you're having, like, reassuring my daughter when we parked the car that there's nothing wrong with you. You're a little bit nervous about going into a store by yourself. There's nothing wrong. That's just human experience. Let's just move through it so we can get to the other side. It's beautiful over there. I guarantee you there's a rainbow, when we get to the other side of this uncomfortable. But I think as humans, and maybe a little bit if I say this, that our youth don't like to be uncomfortable. Most people don't like to be uncomfortable. But through this period of time that we've been in, we've really been like not allowing people to get uncomfortable. We have to get uncomfortable in order to grow. Like I have to be uncomfortable on my mat, like physically in a yoga pose, in order to get to the next place or where I want to go. So if someone comes to me and they're like, I really want to learn how to do da 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 da. I'm like, okay, well, this needs to be the steps, right? Because you can't just force yourself into that. You have to, first of all, have the flexibility, then you have to have the strength, then we have to have the mindset, then we have to have the willingness to fall, right? And then we put that all together and we find the yin and the yang, or the hard and the soft, because in every pose, we can't just muscle our way into, well, you can. Sometimes I see people muscle their way into it, but it's not sustainable, right? They can't hold it.
Yep.
And I'm not a big person, nor do I have ginormous muscles, but I can work my way into things because there's this balance of hard and soft going on in my body at the same time, which allows me to be in a balancing pose. And it looks easy from looking at it, but it's just because I've spent years finding that place of, if we want to call it, balance. It looks like physical balance, but it's a soft and hard that's going on at the same time.
It makes me think of like being determined and compassionate with yourself at the same time.
Absolutely.
Like that's incredible mental toughness. Like people completely underestimate the power of compassion when it comes to being resilient and being able to stay the course and to overcome obstacle, because the resistance comes up within you, and the ability to show yourself compassion in that moment and then get yourself back on the prize, eye on the prize, to say, okay, so what's next? Like in that last moment, I got derailed, but I'm going to show myself compassion and shift forward. Right.
It's like stepping into the Taekwondo ring, right? Stepping into any type of competition, maybe knowing that you're not going to win. Like you kind of know when you're stepping into a ring, or even teams, like you kind of know to a certain degree. So stepping into a ring where you know that you're not going to win, but having compassion with yourself rather than the child melting down. They're just like, oh, I'm going to learn something because this person's better than me. And I know that going in, but I'm going to really learn from them. What am I going to learn from them?
I love that. I love
but
that.
Again, that's another podcast.
Yeah, another conversation. We'll come back around to it. There's so many conversations we want to have and unpack when it comes to, all those pieces of competition and everything else. The interesting piece is episode 5, episode 6, and episode 7 have been 3 different conversations with mentors of mine. And every one of them, the people have said, it all comes down to awareness, which happens to be the first principle of transformation in the book Choice Point, right? So it's just interesting, like, how can we build awareness around our own lives, our nutrition, what it is we want, and what's holding us back from what we want, and cultivating this experience, this internal experience of balance, right? To be able to, what I heard, and you tell me what you think here, but what I heard is, number one, if awareness is so important, and that's the ability to let go of the thoughts, right? To not attach or identify to things such as anxiety or depression as it's who you are, but it's just something you're experiencing. There's going to be resistance. So expecting the resistance to a certain degree as we venture into a place that's uncomfortable to create balance. So we have to get uncomfortable. There has to be that resistance. It has to be this combination of hard and soft, and to be able to show yourself some compassion. So if it was those 3 things, if it was, to be able to not identify with your thoughts, to be able to understand that there's going to be resistance, and when the resistance shows up, to allow yourself some compassion to be able to push forward through it. Like, I don't know, is there anything that resonates with you there, or that you would like to add to that as ways of being in the world that are going to allow for you to experience more balance?
I think that, like you're saying, it just all starts with that awareness. And I think as humans, unless you've been practicing this, I see people come into the yoga studio and they are not aware. They are not aware of, what is going on in their body, or even, that their thoughts are rambling and creating stories. And so that's such a process of just that. And today we sat for probably 10 minutes at the beginning of class. I was just talking about, like, be aware, like, what do you feel? Not trying to change it. We're not trying to change it. If I have soreness in my lower back from pulling weeds over the long weekend. It's not that I'm trying to change that. I just need to be aware of it. Then I need to add the breath piece in, and then try to soften around it. How do I soften around anything that I have no awareness? So I can't help people progress in yoga, like the physical part of yoga, until they understand that they need to be aware of what's going on. Where's your body holding resistance? And there's always an emotion attached to the physical resistance, right? A whole nother podcast. But like understanding that and then releasing and letting go of this physical resistance, which allows for the mental resistance to also release. And again, there's balance, right? Finding that we can't do one without the other. And I think some people come in thinking that balance is, finding this place of, this zenny place of balance. And it's not, it's the yin and the yang. It's the sway of, the hard and the soft. Like I use that a lot, the hard and the soft. There has to be hard and soft in everything, in our thoughts and in our physical movement and in our breath even, Yeah.
I had a cough there. I had to mute my mic. I'm going to use that. I'm going to start using that in my yoga practice, not my own personal practice, but when I teach, is this finding this hard and the soft, because I basically have two different practices that I engage with, either on my own personal mat or when I teach. And one is hard, like the true Kokoro yoga, where we are implementing in, everything from, martial application. We might even do burpees, like who knows, like we're going to do push-ups, we're going to do squats. And then there's going to be some flow in between, like Kokoro yoga is very vast that way. Or this like slow flow preparation for meditation, which I use both these practices on a daily basis in my own life, but it's either hard or soft, right?
Yeah.
But to start to integrate into my practice personally and as a coach, as a teacher, this hard and soft at the same time. See, so this is why I love these conversations and why we're exposing people to these conversations, because this is the conversations that I've been having with people for years, every day, with mentors, with friends, with other yogis. And it's like, oh, we're always like, man, we should have recorded that. Someone should have heard that. Like this is really important. This might help connect the dot for somebody to liberate some energy, to transform their life, or to, experience what's next in their life. So, to be able to be in that place of hard and soft at the same time, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful image. That's a great place.
Very Tai Chi thought, right? And in Taekwondo anyways, it really comes into it. Like if I'm punching, I'm soft until the very end. And right at the end, I'm hard, right? But it's soft until I get there. And once you learn that, you get really fast, right? Between the soft and the hard. And it's the same with the kicking or breaking boards or anything. There has to be this soft component and then this hard component right at the end on impact. But if I do hard all the time, then I'm exhausted in competition. I can't do that. I have to be very soft until impact. Otherwise, your endurance, like you just can't physically fight for 3 minutes hard all the time. There has to be soft in between, hard impact, soft, hard impact, right?
Yeah. I think about that in terms of like preparation for big events or for launching a business or whatever it is. Like right now I'm in a bit of like this approach was soft. Now it's hard. Like I'm out there a lot, doing a lot of different things and putting my voice out there. Right. And even sports, we used to be really good when I was at Eastern about allowing for the guys to be loose and soft on Fridays at practice, and even Friday nights and Saturday, like focused, but relaxed. Right. And then it came this point in time when it was game time, when it was like, okay, now it's time to get hard.
Yeah.
Now it's time to get hard. Right. And even in the hard, to be able to transition from moment to moment. Hey, something didn't go well. We're down 19-0 in national championship game. Like, let it go, because here we are. We still come back and find a way to win,
Right.
So that hard,
which is the same as being uncomfortable, right? Like we talked about being uncomfortable, and you can't be uncomfortable all the time. You'll implode or something, right? You've got to have some time when you're comfortable and sitting back and drinking tea or whatever, you've got to find the comfortable. And that's why in the yoga practice, we have times of rest, right? And I talk about, we're going to work hard, but then we're going to rest hard. So we might have gone through some flow really aggressively, but then we're going to go into child's pose and rest, and being able to take your body from this work to this rest really quickly, or the hard to the soft, or integrating them together is so important, right? I think most people in our culture go hard and then they can't fall asleep at night because they don't know how to like get soft, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of rabbit holes I just came up in my mind talking about like how we learn and neuroscience and rest after a time of work. And
I don't know, balance is a big topic, but
we're just gonna wrap it up and let people know that there's a lot more to come. So I
there's
thank you
so much.
Thank you so much for your time, Barb. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
And,
well, thanks for inviting me. It's always
it's
good to have a conversation with you.
And we're gonna do
I
it
always
again.
learn something.
Yep, we're gonna bring it back around, and we're gonna continue this conversation, and we're having these conversations while we're learning from each other, we're growing, we're pushing, so they're gonna constantly be evolving, and I'm just super excited for what's coming. So I have one more question for you, is just what's new, what's up front in your life right now? Like, what are you excited about?
I'm super excited about coaching the integrated performance, and just kind of taking I never thought really about going this direction until, of course, we've had conversations and you've encouraged this. And what's new for me is that integrating, we're going to use that, integrating these tools that we're talking about today into my yoga coaching. So like today, I was able to just bring a lot of those tools into the practice as we're practicing, as we're moving. And I'm talking about, these tools, being aware, regulating all of these things, and maybe coaching small groups of people. And of course we'll move, of course we'll do some yoga, but we'll also deep dive into using these tools, because, I have learned so much from you and from this program, and it's changed the way that I'm navigating through my life, and it's changed the way that I'm coaching yoga. And I'm fired up about, really moving in that direction of bringing the two together, because I think that it was, and I said this to you when we first started chatting about breathwork meditation, I'm like, that's the missing puzzle piece in my coaching, is that. And I feel like, okay, here's the puzzle piece, I'm putting it in, I've really created balance, right? Like that's what I'm looking for. Like maybe it was a little off balance, a little physical side of my yoga practice and coaching that. That's the athlete side of me that loves that. But there's so much that maybe was missing. And that's what I'm recognizing through this. So I have learned and learned and learned every conversation we've had, and going through your program with you, I just learned so much. And it's simple, but it has to be practiced. And that's what I'm fired about, is me personally practicing it and then sharing my experience, which is what I do with yoga. Like I'm only teaching from my own experience, or if I'm coaching, and when I was coaching Taekwondo, I'm only coaching from my experience, like what works for me. And this works, this integrated performance, the tools, they work for everyone. So sharing that is really fired up at the mat and wherever. Awesome. My kids, like I have one child left at home, and I'm just super fired up about teaching her these tools and getting her, as she moves into adulthood, with these tools. Nothing could be more powerful than that, than stepping into that hard time in your life with these tools.
I wish, this is one of my motivations, right? Is I wish I knew this when I was that age, right? I mean, that's one of the motivations to share it.
Would have changed my world.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on, and we will see you on the mat, at the mat.
Okay. I'm super excited about that. Thanks, Ryan.